Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time we are exploring a really interesting book. It's called I Have Some Questions for You by Rebecca Makkai. And it looks at a lot of different things, actually. It's framed around a murder mystery, but also goes into memory, justice, and how we process the past. All really interesting stuff.
Yeah, it's a great book. It's a really interesting choice for a deep dive, too. I mean, the setting is a boarding school, which automatically has this feeling of secrets and closed-off communities. And then you have Body Kane, the protagonist. She's dealing with all this past trauma connected to the school. You're kind of hooked right from the start.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we have Body, who is a successful podcaster now.
Yeah.
But she's drawn back to her old school to teach a course. And she gets caught up in this unsolved murder from when she was a student. Her roommate, Thalia Keith, was the victim. And it seems like that experience really shaped Body.
And that's where the novel really starts looking at the idea of memory. It's not this fixed thing. It changes, and it's unreliable. Makkai demonstrates this through conflicting accounts of the same event, like how Beatty remembers the night Thalia was murdered. It's completely different from what other people say happened. And even Bodhi's own memories change throughout the book. It makes you wonder, how much can we really trust our own memories?
Right. That's a scary thought. To think that what you remember might not be how it actually happened. It's almost like gaslighting yourself.
It really is.
If you were Bodhi going back to that place, you'd probably be going through all your memories too, wondering if they were accurate or if they'd been changed by trauma.
Absolutely. And that uncertainty about what really happened affects our sense of justice, too.
For sure.
I mean, if you can't even be sure of your own memories, how can you ever be sure of anyone else's?
Right. Like, how can you figure out what really happened? Especially with something as complex as a murder. So we have this murder mystery going on. But then Makkai adds another layer, which is the influence of media on all of this, especially true crime podcasts.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Especially since Buddy is a podcaster.
Right. It's like Makkai knew exactly what she was doing.
It seems like she's asking us to think about our obsession with true crime. Does listening to all this content change how we see these cases? Does it make us want the most dramatic version of the story, even if it's not the truth?
It definitely makes you think. Like with those popular true crime podcasts, everyone has a theory and they get so passionate. Are people more interested in being entertained than actually finding out what happened?
That's a great question. And I think Makkai is intentionally playing with that ambiguity. Body embodies that tension because she's a podcaster. On one hand, she wants justice for Thalia, but on the other hand, is she also trying to make a really interesting story for her listeners? You never really know her motivations.
That's so true. And the boarding school setting just makes everything feel even creepier. It's not just any school. It's this elite, almost gothic place with all these secrets.
Yeah, and Makkai's descriptions of the school make it feel like the building itself is hiding something. That atmosphere just adds to all the paranoia and suspicion that you get with a murder investigation.
It's true. The school almost becomes like another character in the story.
It does. It plays into all those classic boarding school tropes, like how things are hidden and appearances are everything.
It's like Makkai is taking those ideas and tuning them up to 11, which is just brilliant.
It really is. You know, this is where Makkai really shines as a writer. She brings all these different elements together, the mystery, the unreliable memories, the media, and then she adds another layer, which is how women are portrayed in these types of stories.
That's so true. It's not just about solving the murder. It's about how women are often seen in these narratives. Like Makkai is making us think about the biases that we have about female victims.
Yeah, it's subtle, but you can see it in how the book looks back at the original investigation. You get these glimpses of how the media shaped how people saw Thalia. They focused on certain parts of her life and ignored others. It makes you wonder if she was ever really seen as a person, or just as a character in a story that people already had in their minds.
That's a really good point. And then you have Body trying to navigate this investigation as a woman in a field that's dominated by men.
Exactly.
She's always having to prove herself and push back against people who don't take her seriously.
Yeah, you really feel that tension throughout the book. Makkai shows how Body is underestimated, even by people who are supposed to be on her side. It makes you wonder if a man would face the same challenges.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
It's like the book is asking, whose voices are we listening to in these cases? And whose stories are we choosing to believe? Are we contributing to harmful stereotypes just by being interested in true crime?
That's the thing about Makkai's writing. She doesn't tell you what to think. She just makes you think critically about your own assumptions about crime and justice.
It's one of the reasons I couldn't put the book down. You get drawn in by the mystery.
Yeah.
But then you realize you're also dealing with these bigger questions about truth and memory and how we make sense of these events as a society.
Exactly. It's like this puzzle box. All the pieces fit together, but the overall picture is really complex. You think you've figured it out, and then there's a new detail or a new perspective. That changes everything.
And that leads us to the ending, which I know some people didn't like, but I thought it was brilliant.
Me too. It doesn't wrap everything up neatly. There's still questions at the end. It's more like real life that way.
That's true.
It's like Makkai is saying, sometimes there aren't easy answers.
I like that.
It's almost like a challenge to the reader. Okay, I've given you all the pieces. Now what are you going to do with them?
Right.
It's up to you to decide what you believe and to figure out what it all means.
Which makes it so much more than just a regular mystery.
It really does. You keep thinking about it long after you finish reading.
I think that's what I liked most about it, that it doesn't have a simple ending. The questions about the case and about body, they just stay with you. It's like the story keeps going even after you've finished the book.
I know what you mean. It makes you think about what a good ending really is. We're so used to everything being wrapped up, especially in mysteries. But that's not how real life works.
No, it's not. And maybe that's part of what Makkai is trying to say. It's not just about finding out who did it. It's about how we deal with things that are complicated and messy.
That's true.
As humans, we try to make sense of things. We tell stories and focus on certain details to make things seem more ordered than they really are.
And those stories can be really powerful. They affect how we remember things and how we understand our own lives.
Sometimes I wonder how much of what we think is true is actually just a story we've told ourselves.
That's a deep thought.
And it makes you think about who gets to tell those stories.
Exactly.
Whose perspective are we hearing?
Those are the questions that I have some questions for you makes us think about. It reminds us that even with all the information we have now, finding the truth is still really hard.
And it's something we all have to do. We can't just believe everything we're told. We have to be critical and ask questions, even if it means we might never have all the answers.
I think that's a good way to live.
This deep dive has really given me a lot to think about.
Me too.
It's a really well-written mystery, but it's also so much more than that. It stays with you long after you're done reading it.
It does.
It makes you question everything you thought you knew.
Well, if you're looking for a book that will make you think and maybe challenge some of your ideas, this one is definitely worth reading.
For sure. We'll leave you with this. If we can never really know the whole truth, how do we deal with things that are unfair? And how do we move forward? Something to think about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. See you next time.